I asked the vice president if Abrego Garcia has not committed a crime, and the U.S. courts have found that he was illegally taken for the United States, and the government of El Salvador has no evidence that he was part of MS-13. Why is El Salvador continuing to hold him in CICOT? And his answer was that the Trump administration is paying El Salvador, the government of El Salvador, to keep him at CICOT.
That is Maryland Senator Chris Van Hollen. He is in El Salvador today to try to push for the return of Kilmar Abrego Garcia. Senator Van Hollen, who represents the state that Abrego Garcia called home for 15 years, says that Salvadoran authorities would not let him visit Abrego Garcia and that they denied his request to speak with him on the telephone. Joining us now is one of the attorneys representing Kilmar Abrego Garcia, partner at Murray Osario immigration law firm, Rena Gandhi. Rena, thank you for being here. Can you first tell us if you've had any contact with Mr. Abrego Garcia?
We have not.
What is your understanding of how he's doing, or what he is aware of in terms of this fight happening and reaching the Supreme Court?
To be honest, I can only assume, and I can only assume he knows nothing. We've not been able to speak with him. As you saw, the senator has not been able to get in touch with him. I do not know if he knows anyone is fighting for him.
Rena, what is the legal path forward after the United States Supreme Court rules 9-0 that the Trump administration must facilitate his return, and the Trump administration basically says, nope, not going to do it?
Well, the court does have a number of different avenues of recourse. The court can hold them in contempt, can issue sanctions. Those are yet to be seen, and I think the court is being extremely fair in giving the government the opportunity to present their side and to show evidence that they have been actually complying, and that is what the next 2 weeks are about.
Rena, the political sort of climate in this country seems to be able to hold these two things in their head, and we saw it at a town hall for longtime Republican Senator Chuck Grassley of Iowa yesterday, where some of his constituents said, "Are you going to bring him home?" You know, he's entitled to due process. That what is at issue here is not what appears to be on the White House's agenda, which is smearing Mr. Abrego Garcia, but the process, due process. How much does that sort of political conversation mesh with your legal strategy?
It really doesn't play a role. It is interesting that the government has decided to push this out today, the day after the court laid into them for their failure to comply with the Supreme Court's order. But it is a distraction, as you said, from the real issue at hand. The facts are Mr. Abrego Garcia was unlawfully removed from this country, taken from his family, and given no due process. That's it. And that's what we're fighting for.
Rena, do you have any sense in terms of the work on this case as to whether or not there are other cases where the facts suggest the people who were denied due process are not guilty of the things the Trump administration is alleging they are guilty of?
We have been receiving emails as a result of, the publicity around this case. I can't personally speak to that. Those are being handled by other attorneys who have their own strategies. But, I think it's been reported as such.
Let me bring you, Mary McCord, into this conversation. What if you are making sort of a national security argument, at least publicly? What are you keeping secret if you're taking that route?
You mean are you wanting me to get in the heads of the Trump administration?
Well, I'm just wondering if it's really, the argument that they seem to be making as the public is sort of homing in on this reality that what he was denied was due process, and that smearing him, which seems to be the White House strategy today, it changes day to day, that what they've tried to do in their defense of their extrajudicial conduct is to lean on national security arguments, crime arguments, things that because they've denied him due process, there is no opportunity to test the veracity of those claims. How sustainable is that?
Yeah. I mean, I think they have two goals with that, right? One is a legal goal and one is sort of public opinion. Their legal goal is because the courts typically do defer to the executive on matters of national security and foreign policy. They feel like as many things as they can shoehorn into that box, national security, foreign policy, they can keep the courts away from reviewing it. And that's one reason why, in not the case of Abrego Garcia, but the case that we were just talking about involving Judge Boasberg, that's one reason that he pointed out, but it would be valid here as well, that it's the administration themselves that are putting out videos about the detainees being marched off of the planes, etc. Kristi Noem going down to CCOT and videoing herself in front of them. So it makes it hard to say that this is also such sensitive national security or foreign policy issues. Also, when you have the president of El Salvador come into the White House and our president and the president of El Salvador, make jokes, frankly, about him doing us such a favor, and maybe we can, you can build 5 more because we may need them for American citizens. I mean, all of this really kind of undermines any argument that this is really about national security or foreign policy or sensitive foreign negotiations. The other thing I think they're trying to do is make the public not care. Why should the public care about, this thing called due process if all we're doing is getting terrorists out of the country? Well, it's because many reasons. One, there's no due process to let those people even contest whether they're members of the gangs that the government says they're members of. In the case of Mr. Abrego Garcia, the government is calling him a member of MS-13, a terrorist organization. His family say he's not. He's never been charged with a crime. The little bit of hearsay evidence going back to 2019 that suggested connection with that gang was also in part based on information from a detective that has since lost his job because of false statements in other matters. I mean, there's just no there. And you need that due process to contest whether you're even part of this gang. But the Trump administration just goes right past that. They just allowed that completely and go straight to these are terrorists. And I think that's to get Americans to not care. The other reason that's important is if you don't care about the terrorists, okay, we're getting the terrorists out of the country. We don't care about that. Well, what about other people? What about the people who have green cards, the people here on student visas? Do you care about them, or do you not care about them either because they are immigrants? What about the next step? When it's an American citizen who the president says, oops, we inadvertently, mistakenly picked up American citizen, but now that American citizen is at CCOT and there's nothing we can do, national security. So it's a slippery slope. Yeah. And this is why Americans need to care right now and not at some, future point when it starts to hit closer to home.